We're good? Welcome, everybody. Good to see you. I had some stuff I was thinking of on the way up here. Just had to look it up when I got here. I want to go over everybody who's like the Brahmachari, Krishnadas, the guy behind Krishnadas, and the Tulya. You guys being in the space between the two cameras disturbs me. So just move left or right. Leave that space empty. Thanks, guys. Katie, I got you right up here if you want to come up here. You don't have to like run away. You're cool. Just like it's not right in that space. Okay, that's better. I had a few verses that I thought of. One is from the Bhagavatam, so it's thousands of years old. Another one is from a much more recent text. It's about 500 years old. And then one is from Prabhupada. It's about 50 years old. And they kind of tell a story. So I thought of them sort of spontaneously in unison on the way up. And I thought that we could examine them and think about their meaning. All right, so Kim Pramatasya Bahubi Paro. What of many years in this world bewildered and inexperienced? Paroksha means it means inexperienced or through the experience of another. So it means you haven't experienced it yourself directly. And so Kim Pramatasya, what of the bewildered Bahubi Hayanai, what of many, many years Paroksha, inexperienced and bewildered in this world? What's the value of that? This is it's a rhetorical question. What of that means in Sanskrit? It means what is the value of that? What to make of that? What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of living a life of quiet desperation? What's the purpose of living many years in this world and not really experiencing X? You follow? And this is the years of the pramata, people who are bewildered or confused. Pramata means maddened, but in this context it means bewildered and foolish materialists. Do you guys follow that? Vara muhurtam viditam gatate shreyase yataha. Better. Varam means better. Varam muhurtam. One muhurta. Like just a very, very small period of time. A muhurta is like 48 minutes. Generally speaking, a muhurta is 48 minutes. And so, better just one muhurta, which is viditam, which is in knowledge. Viditam means knowledgeable, but it's from the word vid, where you get the word Veda from, actually. Also where you get the word video from in English. It comes from the same root. Because through a video you see something and you know it. So, varam, muhurtam, viditam. Better a moment of knowledge. So, what's the value of a whole lifetime of many years in this world of just being bewildered and materialistic and not really having that experience X? Because it says paroksha, it means like by an experience, but we don't know what that inexperience is. We could guess, but the verse is going to tell us. Varam muhurtam viditam. Better a moment of knowledge. Gatate shreyaseyataha. By which one strives for the highest benefit. Sometimes you get these in any language you have words which appear in unison together, almost as a compound. A true compound would be like a red coat. It's a term where those two words derive a brand new meaning in unison with one another. But we have a lot of things in English where the words, they each have their independent meaning, but they're normally used, like for instance, forgive me, but in like a compound like red coat, the word red and the word coat mean something. You're sitting in the wrong place. Move just one way or the other. I already told everybody to move, yeah. You know what? You're cool. Just stay there. It's all right. I'll deal with it. I got to get over this at some point. I have like a pet peeve. I don't like to look at people through the two cameras, but I'm just going to get over myself and leave it. The word red has a meaning. The word coat has a meaning, but the word red coat takes on a brand new meaning. You follow? Does that make sense? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sometimes you have words which occur oftentimes in unison. They still both retain their original meaning, but you find them often occurring together. For instance, rules and regulations. You follow? The word rules really has the same meaning. The word regulation has the same meaning, but you see them oftentimes together. Does that make sense? There's all sorts of things like this in English, There's the haves and the have-nots, right? There's the do's and the don'ts. You find like things like this, right? Does that make sense? There's book smarts and there's street smarts. You get it? So in a language, a lot of times, you'll have words. They still retain more or less their original meaning, but you often find them in unison. So in Sanskrit, you have these two terms, Shreyas and Preyas. They're very, very common terms. Almost anybody who's Hindu. You were born in India?
Yes.
How long have you been a Hare Krishna devotee?
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years. Which part of India are you from?
Southern India.
You're from South. Which place?
Chennai.
Okay, yeah, sure. You know these terms, Shreyas and Preyas?
Yes.
You know them from your experience in ISKCON, or you know them from your childhood?
I've heard the term, but yeah, I knew about them from ISKCON.
You learned them from us. Any other Daishis in the room? No. You heard the terms growing up, but you didn't really know what they meant. But you did hear the terms, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very common terms in Hinduism in India. Shreyas means benefit or value, but it's used in conjunction with the word preyas, and preyas means material value or quick value or consumerist value or fleeting value, something that you get excited about but doesn't have much endurance. And Shreyas refers to spiritual long-term value. Shreyas and Preyas. They oftentimes occur side by side. Jnana vijnana also occurs side by side. Knowledge and detailed knowledge. Knowledge and true knowledge. So you get these terms in Sanskrit. So this is gatate shreyaseyataha. Because that one moment of knowledge will make you strive for Shreyas, the highest value. So now we know what X is all of a sudden. What's X? Kim, super loud, yell at me. I'm disturbed. Okay, Ian, what's X? No. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't sound like you know what I'm talking about. Maybe I didn't set it up right. Let me do it again. It's kind of a 2 + 2 = 4 situation. But maybe I need to speak with a different cadence and then it'll be obvious. Here we go. Kim pramatasya bahubi. What of many bewildered hayanai years, iha, in this world, parokshai, inexperienced. Inexperienced in what way? Inexperienced in what sense? Inexperienced for me as an X. What's that experience that we're talking about? Varam muhurtam viditam. Better a moment of knowledge. Why? Because yattaha, by that, gatate shreyasa. You'll search after the shreyas. You'll search after the ultimate value. You follow? So what's the experience? Like how can we now define what the inexperience is versus the experience? What's that magical moment? You guys still didn't get it? The magical moment, the X thing, the thing which distinguishes the inexperienced from the experienced, that moment of knowledge, is that thing which paints a picture of, or illustrates, or details, or inspires you to dedicate your life to self-realization. It's a glimpse of something bigger than yourself, bigger than this world. Does that make sense? You follow this? Like nowadays, if you're not like a psycho BLM, if you don't get BLM tattooed on your forehead, you're like a Ku Klux Klan member. It's, whatever. It can't take too many news cycles, so Twitter's moved on. There's a few diehards who are still posting BLM every single day, but the world does move on. But there was a mood last year that if you didn't get like a big tattoo BLM on your forehead, you were like, practically speaking, a Nazi Ku Klux Klan member. Do you guys remember this? You guys remember this, right? Right? And then if you were to say like, look, somebody was murdered on TV. It's horrible. Those people should go to jail. But if you just cross the border to Mexico, just right down there, where people whose lives are as valuable as yours live, just right there. Hundreds of politicians were murdered last year, same year. And if you tried to record those murders that were largely, committed by police officers, when they tried to investigate the Mexican police, and everybody, was corrupt. Like 60, 70% of the police force was corrupt. And so they just had to make a brand new police force, a federal police force. They had to federalize the police force. So now the government's major crackdown on stuff is the federal police have to operate all over the country because the local police forces are all insanely corrupt. And if you go down there, just right there, and you videotape it, you'll get killed. You follow? We have murder, a fraction of what goes on down there. We have corrupt cops, a fraction of what's going on down there. But somehow when it happens here, it becomes this huge, huge deal. Because, well, if you're American, your life counts for more. If I was to say that, I would be like, I practically speaking might as well have joined the KKK. Or if we start to go, hey man, all the problems that we're freaking out about in this country are really first world problems. Did you know that 3 million children died of starvation last year? 3 million. Do you follow that? How's that for a crime? 5 million children are stunted. It means they're going to be like 6 inches shorter with a much lower IQ because they were malnourished. They lived, but they're going to be dwarfed in this lifetime. Both cognitively as well as and behaviorally as well as physically. The millions of sex slaves. Like today in this world. You start, it's like we got all these first world problems, all these American problems. We think it's the worst thing in the world. We're marching on the streets, we're freaking out. But like, what the hell? There's way worse carnage going on at every moment all over the rest of the world. What the hell's wrong with you selfish, nationalistic, racist people in this country who don't care about anybody else anywhere in the rest of the world unless they're from your country and they're from your clan and they're your color? You guys follow that? You think we're bad in this country? They just outlawed slavery in 2007 in Mauritania, in North Africa. You got that right. 2007. They had legal slavery in Mauritania in Northwest Africa up until 2007. They still have slaves in Mauritania. They made it illegal officially, but there's still hundreds of thousands of slaves today. Did you guys know that? No, you didn't know that. You heard that from me if you know that. We got 1 million too few women in China. We got 1 million too few women in India. You know why? Huh? What do you mean they kill the babies? Like they just go and kill babies?
Women and children, right?
They what?
They want to have sons.
So they just kill small women? They just kill baby girls?
Yeah.
They get abortions, selective abortions. They find out they're having a boy or girl, and they do selective abortions. Then they make it illegal in India to tell you the birth of your child, to tell you the sex of your child. You'll lose your medical license in India if you tell somebody the sex of their child. Do you know that? You know that, right? You Indian? No? Sorry, man. Brown skin, face mask. I couldn't tell. It's illegal. Because people are so misogynistic and bigoted that if they find out they're having a female child, they'll abort it, do a late-term abortion. Gnarly, right? Bulk of the world's abortions are right here in this country, by the way. We abort more kids than any other country in the world. Did you know that? Did you know that? Yeah, it's heavy, man. It's like a national pastime in this country. So, there's carnage. There's terrible stuff going on all over the world. And when you start to really think about it, if you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself and make the world a better place, and you really start to look at it, you'll drown in feeling absolutely inept and paralyzed to do anything. You got to keep myopic. Pick a low cause. And then forget about all the other causes. Because you try and get too big, you try and see the big picture, you won't be able to move. You'll get paralyzed. Take your pick. Forget about equal rights. How about ending slavery? That still needs to get done. How about ending sex slavery? How about ending starvation? You follow? It's paralyzing. If you really care about people, what to speak of, you decide like animal suffering is valuable. 50 million animals are killed every year. 1 to 3 trillion fish are killed every year. That's a whole other thing you got to wrap your head around. I mean, does their suffering matter less? Yeah, it matters less. If you see a dog being killed in the street, and then you see a baby being killed in the street, Which one are you going to like run and freak out about? Yeah, that makes sense. Is it specious? Maybe a bit. Sure. It's more developed consciousness. They don't feel pain differently. Legally, we've just determined this. If you kill an animal, it's not murder. It's a felony in a number of states, but it's not murder. There was an Animal Welfare Act of 1966 that pertained to the whole country. But most states, almost all states, I think all states, all 50 states, have increased penalties that go above and beyond the National Federal Welfare Act. And I think in 40 states it's a felony. So, just kill an animal, maim an animal, something like that. But it's not murder. You're not going to do life in prison. We value human life more than animal life. But of course it doesn't mean animal life is totally unimportant. And when we're talking about 50 million land animals every year, that's 7 times the world's population. You go and sing. Then you think about all the kids getting molested, all the women being abused. And it's just like people who are still alive and they're being tortured on the daily. Like run around your neighborhood, like break down doors. You guys understand this? Okay, I'm going to go big now. I think that to pursue spiritual life trumps all of that. I think to pursue spiritual life and help people become spiritually enlightened is the most valuable thing you can do in this world. It's the highest cause. It's better than all those other causes put together. Because we're all ultimately souls. And although we have bodies, and we need to take care of people's bodies, just taking care of people's bodies is no better than animal life. Just taking care of people's skins and their bodies won't ultimately help them solve the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease. The biggest problem is that we're souls who've misidentified with this world, and we're in a prison of our own making. And so the greatest welfare you can do, the biggest thing you can be a part of, the hugest mission you can participate in, is the mission to become self-realized yourself and help others. It's para upakar. It's the greatest welfare work. Upakar means to work for somebody close to you, to do something for somebody close to you. Para upakar is the greatest welfare work, the greatest way to help somebody close to you. So this X moment that makes you search after self-realization is this moment when you realize I'm a spirit soul, this body's temporary, I'm made for something bigger than this world, and the purpose of my existence is to pursue that truth, to make it available to others. That's the revolution of spirituality. If you are a mundane welfare worker trying to end world hunger or sex slavery or anything, that's not self-realization. That's materialism. It's pious materialism, but it's not spiritual. Because it pertains solely to the body. It's a radical idea, isn't it? If you want to test whether what I'm saying is true, I don't know, could you be somebody who's anti-slavery, anti-sex slavery, anti-world hunger, anti-stunted growth, anti-political assassinations, anti-corrupt police, and be a full-blown atheist? The answer is obviously yes, no problem. Could you be like the biggest fighter for that in the world, like dedicate your whole life to that, and be a full-blown atheist? That's the proof it's not spiritual. Spirituality, in any iteration, to really dedicate yourself to a spiritual cause, requires you to have this moment where you realize this is the most important thing. This is the purpose of life. That's the X moment that changes somebody's life and makes it a life of self-realization instead of a life of sense gratification. A life of spirituality instead of materialism. That's the unpopular, revolutionary idea of every major spiritual movement like in the world. You know, early Christians, if you told them, hey, like if the Romans told them, hey, we're going to kill you, crucify you, or you can deny Christianity. People were like lining up. Crucify me. Like, I'm in. Well, you just have to deny Jesus. Won't do it. We're going to kill you if you don't. Okay. You follow this? They wouldn't give up their spirituality, even verbally. Sometimes, you know, the jihadists will get some prisoner and they're going to cut his head off and they want him to read a script, like renouncing the United States or something like that. And some guy's just, sorry, not going to do it. There are things people believe in which are more important even in their lifetime, like even in their life, than their own life. They believe in a cause so deeply they'd rather die for their cause than renounce it, than be disloyal to it, than to betray it. I don't think that's wrong. I'm a firm believer in the statement, if you don't have something you're willing to die for, you got nothing to live for. You have something in your life that's worth living for. More than just yourself and preserving your body. Do you guys follow this? So that X that's spoken about, what's the value of a life of many years that's just wasted, inexperienced, pursuing things in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness that awakens within you this radical idea that the purpose of life is self-realization, not sense gratification. That moment where it switches and you decide, my life is about self-realization. My life is about something bigger than myself. My life is about the biggest concept that exists. Because if you have one moment of that, you can never go back. It's cathartic. It changes the way you look at the world. You're never the same. If that happens for one moment, that's it. You're done. You can never go back. Because it starts you on the journey of striving for the highest thing, the highest benefit. Not preyas, but shreyas. Do you guys follow this? So, I mean, you weren't wrong when you said spirituality, but it was just so anemic. And it didn't you know what I mean? I needed somebody to make this connection. That it awakens you to this idea that the purpose of life is self-realization, not sense gratification. The purpose of life is to love Krishna in our tribe. And not just to pathetically hold on to the body. And that idea is so revolutionary. It even minimizes the value of every secular movement in human society that's intrinsically devoid of spirituality. Doesn't differentiate between the different spiritual traditions. That would be another discussion. But it does sharply relegate every single material cause you can be a part of to being infinitely less important. Do you guys follow this? I mean, I watched George Floyd get murdered. I cried. I watched it multiple times to really let it sink in. I think the people should go to prison for life, especially Derek Chauvin, the guy who actually killed him. I think the rest of the police officers should be guilty at least of manslaughter, maybe with some special circumstances added. They should all do time, and Derek Chauvin should do life. I believe it was murder. I don't believe it was a reckless disregard for human life. I believe it was actually murder, just by the way it went down. I don't like to see people suffer. If you put somebody suffering in my way, I'm going to do what I can to stop it. But I'm not going to drown in it. I'm not going to forget the purpose of human life. And I'm not going to put it on par with self-realization. I've seen the light. I had that X moment. My life has changed. I can't go back. I've realized there's something greater than the things in this world, and you can touch it, and the purpose of human life is to do that. There's this incredible, otherworldly, inconceivable, infinite opportunity we have in this lifetime that goes so far beyond the comings and goings of this world. That's the moment they're talking about. Do you guys get it? That make sense, Jacob? Okay. And this is not a popular idea. It's like, practically speaking, you're not even allowed to say it nowadays. You know? It even feels awkward for me to articulate, but it makes perfect sense, and it's totally logical, it's totally reasonable, and it's the truth. It stands up to scrutiny. He kicked the tires on this idea. It holds up. How do you get that moment? How do you get that moment of knowledge? How do you get that moment of realization that changes your life? That's a natural question, isn't it? Now we know there's a value to it. Now we know what it is. But then how do you come by it? You guys with me? With my train of thought? That's what I thought of on my way up here. So I thought of that verse, and I thought about how does that moment occur? You follow? What's the answer? Huh? I can't hear you. Yell at me. To inquire about the absolute. If you inquire about the absolute, then it means you've already understood its value. Did you follow that? It's like if I go, hey, the purpose of life is to get married. And you're like, how do you do that? And you're like, you get married. Hold on. So if you inquire towards the absolute, it means you value the absolute and you start to pursue it. I'm asking, how do you get to the place where you start to be interested in the absolute? So if inquiring about it is a prerequisite, we've gone nowhere. You follow? Do you understand my critique? Who's got an answer for my question? Yeah.
I think you just get tired of...
All right, material exhaustion. Good. Of course, people get material exhausted and they go find happiness in a bottle. So material exhaustion. Do people ever become material exhausted and hopeless and despondent and they don't give up materialism? And they're still atheists?
Yes.
Yeah, we call them nihilists. Sometimes they commit suicide. So just material exhaustion by itself is not enough. If you have to inquire about the absolute, you're already there. Who's got the answer for me? Everybody know my question? I spent a lot of time explaining what that X moment was, right? And I compared and contrasted to every other bigger cause people are a part of, right? And I took the biggest ones I could think of, the ones that are most popular and it make the most sense, the people are most up in arms about, and I sharply relegated all of them to being, practically speaking, insignificant compared to this ultimate one. And I tried to make a sustainable argument, an uncomfortable argument that made sense. And now I'm asking, how do you get that realization? Where does that realization come from? All right, Liv, yell at me. Put your mask down, yell at me.
When you hear about the Vedas, the knowledge.
All right, we'll give you the win. Krishna Bhakta Janma Mool Hoy Sadhu Shanga. The root cause of devotion to Krishna is the association of devotees. You hear a message. You know what the word gospel means? It means good news. You hear the good tidings. You hear the good news. You hear the gospel. Who do you hear from? A devotee. That's right. Somebody explains this to you in a compelling way and changes your life. Krishna Bhakti Janma, the birth of Krishna Bhakti. Krishna Bhakti is born. You follow? Mool, the root of the birth of Krishna Bhakti. Mool means root. Janma means birth. The root of the birth of Krishna Bhakti, hoy, there is one. What is it? Sadhu Sangha. The association of devotees. Krishna prema jamme teho puna mukha anga. After you have Krishna prema, Krishna prema jamme. After you have Krishna prema, love for Krishna, after you become fully accomplished, teho puna mukha anga. It again is the primary limb of your devotion. It gives birth to your devotion to Krishna, and even after you become accomplished, it's still mukha anga, the primary limb, the most important thing. It causes you to start, and even after you become accomplished and perfected, it's still your sustenance. If you think about this, right? We call it the Mosaic tradition. Judaism is called the Mosaic or Abrahamic tradition because Moses and Abraham taught it. Then there's the apostolic succession. That's because everything we know about Jesus came from a group of people, his disciples, his apostles. And therefore everything you know about Jesus comes through these individuals who articulated and fleshed out and systematized and codified his teachings for the world. And anything anybody knows about Jesus comes from those people. There's no Allah without Muhammad either. There's no Buddha without Ananda. If you want to understand these prophets, these people and their message, it comes through a succession of individuals who understood it and then passed it on. Even you read a book, that book was written by somebody. Theoretically, God could reach out to you and touch you, then you become the prophet. But if that doesn't happen, then you connect with somebody who connected with somebody That's the vital lineage of every tradition on the planet. You hear the message, you digest it, you become empowered, you pass on to the next person. Krishna Bhakti Jamma Mul Hoy Sadhu Shanga. Krishna Prema Jamme Teho Puna Mukha Anga. The root cause of bhakti, of this radical idea about the nature of the relationship between the soul and God. The root cause of it is you listen to a devotee, you hear from a devotee. Even after you get perfection, that's still the root of your connection. That's a radical statement, isn't it? First statement was radical. Second statement is radical. Second statement was spoken thousands of years after the first statement. And you see in these two statements, you see an answer to a question. So the first question is, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is self-realization. How do I learn that? I don't know. Then you go to the next verse, and it tells you. You connect with a devotee, and they speak to you, and it changes your life. If you were born a member of our movement, that person was your parents. If it didn't happen, then you'll have doubts at some point, and some people you'll need to come and resolve them. If you joined our movement, then there was somebody who did this for you. It's the way it works. It's the way it's always worked. It's the way it always will work. You guys follow me? To really cap this off, I want to go to something that Srila Prabhupada said. It's important, a lot of times we have this monergistic understanding of spirituality where it's like somebody else's responsibility, but spirituality is really synergistic. Finding a qualified guru is rare. You know what's just as rare? Finding a qualified student, yeah. So then there's our part. And Prabhupada makes this beautiful point. He says that you have to hear purely the message of divinity. But it's not possible to hear purely unless your activities are pure. Do you follow this? And I want to focus on this for the final moments of class. The message can be spoken, and the magic doesn't necessarily take place. For the magic to really take place, you have to hear properly. Your ears have to be open so the knowledge can be poured into you. And for those ears to be wide open, your life has to be pure. So we kind of we get people involved a little bit, and then they change their activities, and then when we talk to them, then the magic happens. You follow? It's kind of it ratchets back and forth. They can't just purify themselves on their own, and then here we have to give them a message, then they purify themselves, then we give the message, then they purify themselves, back and forth. But at a certain point, you're no longer a dabbler. At a certain point, you dabble with us for long enough, and you become committed. You become convicted. It becomes irrevocable. And how that happens, how you move from an interest or a dabbling situation or a trying it out situation or an experimenting situation to a situation where you are convinced and you've understood and there's no take-backs and you're set and you're never going to leave. That's when you purify your ears and you hear purely, which requires as a prerequisite you purify your activities. And that's why we follow the 4 regular principles. Generally, most religions are don't fornicate, don't eat the meat from pagan animals and stuff like that. They have a whole set of rules, somewhat similar to our own. The Christians have the same set of rules. It's in the book of Acts. Don't eat meat from pagan altars. We just take it a step further, we're like, don't eat meat at all, you know. Don't eat strangled animals. We're like, yeah, don't eat meat at all. They're like, don't eat animals with blood. We're like, yeah, just don't eat meat at all. You know? And so we have these rules. And usually the rules are like, it's like kind of like a heaven and hell thing. If you do this, then you're going to go to hell. It's like a bad thing, you're going to be punished. That's not really the problem. The problem is if you commit sinful activities. They're so powerful that they dumb you down. They dumb you down. If you're intoxicated, your mind's just bewildered. And if you're lusty, you're focused on sex, you're focused on finding a mate, you're focused on orgasm, and then you get an orgasm and there's like a massive oxytocin hit and massive adjustment to your serotonin levels. I think dopamine probably even kicks in, a whole bunch of neurotransmitters, and you get stupefied. And then it's not like you just have sex one time and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm done, I'm solid, and, then it becomes an addiction. It becomes your coping mechanism to life. And you can't really deal with life on its own terms because you start using this coping mechanism all the time. And then you're eating meat, and it's like you're causing so much suffering. It's like the karma for that just kind of fills up your ears with stool and you can't hear anything. Like that act of cruelty, that act of the wanton disregard for the suffering of others makes you devoid of deep thought. You require some level of cognitive dissonance. You require some level, disassociation. You require some level of dissociation. The cognitive dissonance, the disturbance to your mind that would happen if you actually fathom that the animals feel pain the same way you are, and you're causing them to suffer unnecessarily every day of your life. That cognitive dissonance would destroy your mind. You would become so disturbed. You become apoplectic. You become totally dysfunctional. And so you require disassociation. Which means you can't hear properly. You're in almost a trance-like state. You become willfully stupefied. And so the regular principles we follow are designed to clean up your act so your ears can receive this message and it can take hold in your heart. It can sprout in your heart and it can become yours. What belonged to somebody else becomes yours. Their realization becomes your realization. Their vision becomes yours. That seed can be transplanted and it can sprout in your heart. We actually describe it like this. We call it the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of the vine of devotion that's placed by the Guru and Krishna in the heart of the student. And then is watered through hearing and chanting and grows and conquers this world and reaches Krishna and produces the fruits of love of God, which can be tasted even while you're in this world. We have a whole elaborate metaphor we use to explain the process of how devotion grows in your heart. But for it to grow in your heart, it has to be planted in your heart. It may already be in your heart, but it needs to be activated. So you take it either way. You can say it's already in your heart, or you can say it's planted in your heart. But if it's already in your heart, then it requires to be activated. The activation is the association of a devotee. But it only actually works when you cleaned up your act enough, because if you're too just filled with these incredible, lusty desires to enjoy this world, you won't be able to listen. Sometimes you read a page of a book, or you don't even know what you heard. You ever had that happen? You read a book, you're 10 pages in, you're I don't even know what I read. Somebody's talking, I have no idea what you just said. You can't pay attention, but for the magic to occur, you have to be able to focus. Your heart has to open. And if you're too lusty and greedy and resentful and bitter and twisted up because you haven't cleaned up your act, it won't go in. And so the last verse from Prabhupada, a statement he made in the Bhagavatam in his purports, is that you can't hear purely unless your activities are pure. The message has to be heard purely, and you can only hear purely if your activities are pure. That statement identifies our responsibility in the equation. So I thought of these three verses just sort of together on the way up here. Kim pramatasya bahubi parokshai hayanaiha varam muhurtam viditam gatate shreyase yataha. What's the value of a long life in this world inexperienced? Better one moment of knowledge that catalyzes you and begins you starting on the path towards the absolute. How does that moment occur? Krishna Bhakti Janma Mul Hoy Sadhu Sangha. The root cause of that moment is the association of a devotee. And in case you think that's just a one-time occurrence, Krishna Prema Jamme Deho Puna Mukha Anga. Even after you achieve love of God, it's still the most important thing. Well, how come sometimes people hear from a devotee and they become activated, and some people hear and it just doesn't work? Because you have to hear purely. Well, how do I hear purely? Your activities have to be pure. And that's why we follow the rules. That's why we don't drink or smoke. That's why we're chaste. That's why we don't sleep around. That's why we don't masturbate. That's why we don't eat meat. That's why we live a pure life. Because we really want that message to go in deep. We want to hear that message of Godhead. That sweet song of surrender. The Gita means the song of divinity. We want to hear that sweet song. We want to be able to appreciate it and really relish it. And so we live a life which allows that to occur. You guys follow the little thread? Thousands of years ago? 500 years ago? 50 years ago? 5,550. I wanted to, and it strings together. It makes a beautiful garland, right? And then the last thing I'm thinking of right now is, if you think I can't do it, you're wrong. You can do it. It's too much. No, it's not. I can't give up illicit sex. Yes, you can. I'm addicted to it. No, you're not. I mean, you might be, but it doesn't matter. We can help cure your addictions. Those same devotees who give you the message, they also have the knowledge of how to live a pure life. They can also help you with that. I can't give up using drugs. Yeah, you can. I can't stop vaping. Yeah, you can. Can't stop eating meat. I remember telling the devotee I can't stop eating meat. First met the I can't give up eating meat. Yeah, it turns out I could. Like whatever ails you, we got the cure. Don't know how to do it on your own? No problem. We'll carry you. We can do it. We'll help you purify your life. Then you'll be able to hear the message purely, and then that message will take hold in your heart, and it will become your possession. Just like language. Language is learned from somebody else. You mimic other people. My daughter is 3.5 years old. She's now starting to form extremely complex conversation. Daddy, I just had a thought. What, sweetheart? I thought it might be nice if we go to the temple. Like she'll say stuff like that to me. And I'm like, well, I'm busy right now. She's like, ugh. Maybe later? Like she'll say stuff like that. I'm just like what the hell happened? Like it was gaga goo goo like a minute ago, and now you're speaking these complicated sentences. You follow? It's recursion. It's the magical ability of human speech. Just stack one idea on top of another and form incredibly complex, nuanced statements. Animals don't have it. Human beings do. Noam Chomsky calls it the language acquisition device. It's a part of the human brain. It's just like what allows us to have these incredibly detailed, articulate statements where we can communicate incredibly with other people. You following this? But language doesn't belong to you. Language is just you copying. Your parents speak and you copy them. It's entirely from somebody else. It's pure emulation and copying. Maybe you develop the ability to walk all on your own, but speaking English, no. It's somebody else's property. I borrowed it from them, now it's mine. Now I own the English language. I'm more articulate and well-spoken than both my parents put together. I have a wide vocabulary. I have a black belt in speaking English, just like all of you do. Just because it belonged to somebody else doesn't mean it shouldn't belong to you someday. And you shouldn't make it your own. Just because you have to borrow it from somebody to make it your own doesn't make it a bad thing. So many things we borrow from others and we choose to make them our own. What's the value of a long life? Chasing your tail in this material world. All for naught. A life of quiet desperation. Better you wake up and realize the most important thing you could do with your time that trumps everything else is pursue self-realization and help others. How do I get that? You connect with devotees who have that realization and they bequeath it to you. And it grows in your heart until it becomes yours and it becomes your property. And then you can give it to somebody else. How do I make that happen? You clean up your act. Oh, I got problems. We got solutions. I can't do it on my own. No problem, you don't have to. Same people who give you the message, they know how to fix what ails you. I couldn't possibly be celibate until marriage. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I was. You can too. They were. 2021, you can too. I couldn't possibly stop this or that. Yeah, you can. No, I tripped up. That's cool. We can help you with that. We can make your trip-ups happen less frequently and then happen infrequently and then just not happen anymore at all. Anyway, that's what I was thinking of on the way up. We're right at the 1 hour mark. If you're joining us on IGTV, thank you so very much for listening. Greatly appreciate you.